Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the winter annual cover crop, cereal rye. We'll talk about a lot of the pros and maybe one thing that might not be so good about cereal rye, and hopefully giving you guys enough information so you can make a decision as a land manager as to whether or not to start incorporating it into your food plot routine. So right off the bat, let's talk about one of the negatives of cereal rye. It doesn't necessarily have to be a negative, it's just more something that I wouldn't consider a benefit. So we'll get that out of the way first and then dive into the positives afterwards. One of the characteristics of cereal rye that's not as beneficial as other food plot varieties is the nutritional value. When you're looking at other food plot seed varieties like soybeans or clovers or alfalfa, the protein content in those varieties are much higher than cereal rye. I think with soybeans, you're looking at 25 to 30%. Ladino clover is around 25%. Alfalfa, I think, is around 20%. Oats are down there around 15%. And your brassica blends, those are anywhere from 15 to 30%. And those aren't exact numbers. A lot of that's determined by the quality of your soil. But still, those plants offer a lot of protein. Cereal rye, on the other hand, the protein levels are around 10%. So almost 2 or 2.5 times lower than the other crops. So there's definitely less of a benefit with cereal rye from a nutritional standpoint compared to those other crops. But really, that's one of the only downsides to rye. And now let's kind of jump into some of the positives and talk about why a lot of food plotters are planting cereal rye for their whitetails. So right off the bat, for those of you that are like me and are food plotting on a budget, this first point should make cereal rye very attractive. And that cereal rye is one of, if not the cheapest food plot seed. I think this year when I bought the rye that we put down on our food plots, I got it for around $18 for a 50-pound bag. And the recommended seeding rate for rye grain is 100 pounds per acre. So you could potentially plant an acre's worth of food for under $40. Now that's pretty darn good. Now I do know there's a lot of great food plot companies out there that have competitive prices on their seed, but some of these seeding companies, when you look at the prices of their seed, a lot of times you're looking at like $40 for a half acre or $80 for an acre. So cereal rye is a lot cheaper than a lot of these other seeds. So that's one thing to consider, especially if you're planting on a budget. Another thing that's great about cereal rye is it grows basically anywhere. It's one of the most versatile food plot seeds that you could plant for whitetails. I'm in a couple habitat groups on Facebook, and it's always fun during food plot season when guys are planting cereal rye and they're showing pictures of it growing in the back of their truck, on their gravel driveway. This stuff really does grow just about anywhere. So if those of you guys that have poor soils and you can't really get a clover plot established, you can't plant brassicas, cereal rye is something that you should be able to plant. Because again, it tolerates poor soil, it basically grows anywhere. It also tolerates very low temperatures. This stuff will germinate and continue to grow down into the low 40s or the high 30s. So let's say you planted a food plot in early August, you're going back to check on it, maybe around Labor Day, it's looking pretty sad. You still have an opportunity to throw down a ton of cereal rye and have a plot going into the hunting season. Because here in Southwest Michigan, we're typically not getting that first frost until early to mid-October. Even if you planted the rye in mid-September, you still have about 2 weeks or a month worth of growth before the temperatures start to dip down into the low 30s. Again, it's not going to be consistent, that's just the average first frost. And every time it warms back up, the rye is going to continue to grow. So it's a great food plot seed for poor soils, and for those of you that need to fill in bare spots. Maybe you had a food plot failure, maybe you just bought new property and just got keys to the gate and you still want to put a food plot in this year, cereal rye is an option. Another positive with rye, and this is what we use it for primarily, is that it makes a great cover crop or nurse crop when you're planting those perennial clover plots. Perennial clover doesn't really grow very fast. It tends to grow down before it grows up, meaning it's working on its root system before it's really putting on a lot of growth above the ground. So what can potentially happen is if the deer herd moves in and starts browsing on your young clover, they can just pull it right out of the ground. So they can actually overbrowse and kill your clover plot before it gets established. That's where the cereal rye comes in. If you're planting your clover plot in early August, and then overseeding cereal rye into that clover plot, that rye is going to germinate very quickly, it's going to grow very quickly, and that's going to give those deer something to browse on while your clover gets established. And then by the time spring comes around, the clover will have 2 growing seasons, and then it should be able to withstand a lot more browse pressure from those deer. So if you're someone that's trying to get a clover plot established, definitely consider throwing down some cereal rye as a cover crop or a nurse crop. And along these same lines is one big reason why a lot of farmers and a lot of food plotters are planting cereal rye as a winter cover crop is because of the overall soil benefits. When that rye starts growing back up in the spring, it's going to be putting on a lot of biomass, and a lot of biomass very quickly. Not as much as something like buckwheat, but it still puts on a lot of biomass. And so when you terminate that crop, Whether you're spraying it, whether you're rolling it, whether you're taking a brush hog to it and mulching it down, you're putting all of that organic matter back into the soil. So if you're someone with poor soil and don't have a whole lot of organic matter, adding cereal rye as a winter cover crop can really help you out. Again, each year when you're terminating that rye, and for us here in Southwest Michigan, that's right around the middle of May, you're putting all of that organic matter back into the soil. And it acts as a slow release fertilizer for whatever you have going into the summer. If you're someone that's getting into no-till food plotting, cereal rye is great for that. You can drill your summer crop. A lot of people do soybeans right into the standing rye, and then they'll come right behind that and crimp the rye down. One of the YouTube channels that does a great job showcasing this is the Growing Deer TV channel with Dr. Grant Woods. He calls it the buffalo system, and if you're someone that's interested in no-tilling, I would definitely recommend checking out that channel. They've got it down to a science over there, and it's pretty cool to see those results. Along with being a great cover crop and adding a lot of organic matter to the soil, cereal rye also helps with weed suppression, and it does this in a few different ways. First, because you're seeding rye at a high rate of around 100 pounds per acre, it's coming in pretty thick. So it doesn't really give anything else a chance to start growing. So in the spring, when everything starts warming up, the cereal rye is one of the first things to start growing again. So when those weeds try to start growing, they're already choked out by that thick stand of rye. Another really cool thing about cereal rye is that it has what's called a Laliopathic Properties, or it's an Laliopathic plant. Now I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, I'm sure someone will be kind enough to let me know. But essentially what that means is this plant does not get along with other plants, and it actually hinders the growth of other nearby plants that it's competing with. And it does this by releasing a chemical from the root system. And so that chemical that's released from the root system actually helps suppress weed growth. So it's kind of fighting those weeds in two ways. It's releasing the chemical from the root system, and it's also choking them out if those weeds do start to emerge. So that's definitely a huge benefit for someone if they're trying to limit the amount of herbicide they use on their property. And guys, if you do want more information on kind of the allelopathic principles of rye and kind of how farmers are taking advantage of this and incorporating it into their planting routines, I'll put a link in this video to a channel, I think it's No Till Farmer. So if that interests you and you want to learn more about it, definitely check out that video. He does a way better job of explaining it than I do. And as far as how to plant and when to plant cereal rye, it's actually something that you want to be waiting to plant as opposed to planting in August, like most of the fall annual food plot blends. And this is because deer tend to only prefer it when it's young. So if you're planting it at the same time as you're planting everything else in early August, you might start noticing some use in your plot right away, but after 2 months of growth, by the time the deer season rolls around, that most likely will not be their preferred food source. So definitely wait till at least Labor Day to start throwing this stuff down. As far as the seeding method goes, it really doesn't matter. You don't need anything fancy for field rye or cereal rye. Fill up a bag spreader, spread it on the ground before rain, or you can just take the bag with you and throw it out with your hands. Again, it's a pretty versatile seed. It grows pretty much anywhere. So how you get it down on the ground isn't important. It's really just important that you get it down before rain. So as you can see, rye has a ton of benefits for you as a food plotter. So not only will it grow pretty much anywhere, it's a great last minute seed. You know, it helps build organic matter. It really helps with weed suppression. It's a great nurse crop for those of you that are trying to establish clover plots. But one of the biggest things that I really like about it is that it's something I can actually have my son assist me with when it comes to this habitat management. A lot of the things that we do with habitat management aren't necessarily safe for a 3-year-old, and that's pretty tough on him. He really wants to help with everything that we do, but unfortunately there are just some things that we do that, you know, he just should not be around. Whether it's working with tractors, cutting down trees, not everything is safe for him to be around. But that's one thing that I love about cereal rye is normally when we're planting that, it's the last day we're on our property until we start hunting, and he can be out there helping. He almost goes through 50 pounds all by himself. I fill up a little bucket for him and he'll run around the plot just throwing rye everywhere. So if you guys have young kids and you want their help, this is definitely something that they can help out with. You can't really screw it up. It's not like a brassica plot where you want to make sure you're not planting it too heavy. If they happen to put it all in one spot, you know, it's not the end of the world. The seed is cheap, it's going to grow, they're out there helping you, and that's really what all this is about. Is I want to have success with my hunting season, but I also want to make sure that I'm teaching my son and eventually my daughter about the outdoors, getting them closer to wildlife, just so they can have an appreciation for it. And this is just one more way that I can do that, and I love it. But anyways, I'm sure we didn't cover everything that there was about cereal rye. If there's anything that you guys can think of that I missed, or if you have any questions on it, please drop those comments in the comment section below. This is getting exciting. We're a few weeks out from deer season, and we will see you guys in the next video.